everyone, this is Penny from Our Crazy Adventures in Autism Land, and in this workshop we're going to talk about homeschooling autism from kindergarten to graduation. There are many benefits to homeschooling your child with autism. You will find out pretty quickly that your child is more comfortable and more patient and just feels like less stressed when they're at home because they don't have to mask or keep putting on a front and keep it together for school. You can work at their pace and they can just be relaxed, and that will help you so much. You can follow their interest. Here in Autism Land, we've done unit studies on snakes, we've done unit studies on dance, things that my kids like. So you can go ahead and follow their interest and they can learn at their own pace. You don't have to keep up with the public school pace of making sure that they're ready for the test. They can just learn at their own pace. Remember, even slow progress is still progress, so if their pace is super slow, it's okay. They're still learning. You also build a relationship with your child that you will find helps your therapies and your overall family life just work better. It's hard to be with someone 24/7 and not build a relationship there. So I'm going to give you, in a couple other slides, some tips on how to make sure that you're building a good relationship and that you don't hate each other at the end of homeschooling. But you will find that relationship building is one of the core benefits to homeschooling any child, even your child with autism. Therapies are easier to coordinate because you don't have a school schedule. So if the only OT appointment they have is at 10 a.m., then you can take it. And it will probably be less busy at 10 a.m. than it will be at 3 or 4 p.m. when the public school kids start coming in. So you will find that the therapies are easier to coordinate, your schedule's open, and they work better integrated into schoolwork, and you get more bang for your buck, so to speak, because your child isn't so busy seeing what everybody else is doing. There's not a lot of sensory stuff going on. They're easier to focus. So those are the benefits to homeschooling your child with autism. Is there a window of opportunity to teach your child with autism? There is not. You know the old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, that's just not right. You really can. It's never too late to teach your child new things. Even as an adult, I still teach Logan new things that help improve his quality of life. When you work at their developmental level for every subject, you fill in those gaps, as I've said before, and it helps them to make new synapses, which helps them to learn. Even slow progress is still progress. While you're working at their developmental level, they can move pretty slowly in some areas. Just relax. It'll be okay. Remember, you're filling in gaps. And then sometimes they'll work really fast. So it ebbs and flows. The neuroplasticity reminds us that learning can happen at any time, at any age, in anyone. So that's just science. So your brain is always developing and can make new synapses. You need to celebrate the small successes just as much as the big ones. We always want to celebrate the big ones, like our kid graduated or they finished a math curriculum in a week, things like that. But you have to learn to celebrate the little things, like that day he read a page in his book out loud and only had 2 mistakes, or he sat through the entire math lesson. Little successes like that, if you celebrate them, will help motivate you to keep going during the hard days. And always remember that it's a marathon, not a sprint. You're working right now for the long game, not the short game. So you're going to make the stuff you do now will develop into higher level thinking skills and make your child successful later. Sometimes academics need to take a back seat. Sometimes you have to stop teaching academics because you have some therapy needs that need to be addressed that will help lead you to better academic success. If your child can't sit in a chair or can't focus for more than 5 seconds, then you're going to need to address those therapy needs before you can be successful at academics. We took 2 years off of academics in order to address, Logan had some pretty serious therapy needs, sensory needs, things like that, when he came out of public school. So we took 2 whole years off and addressed those needs so that way when we came back, he was better able to be successful with academics. So working on putting in a sensory diet and working on sensory needs, figuring all that out first, and then starting academics will make learning easier not only for your child, but it'll make it easier for you to teach as well. If your child's coming from public school, you need to deschool. And deschooling just means that you need to take some time off so that your child can relax and get his bearings and you can figure out your game plan. But it also, a lot of times our kids with public school will have some negative episodic memories. They remember that they were overwhelmed and that it wasn't working. So you have to give them time to forget that and to want to learn again. It will also make homeschooling easier for everyone. Like I said earlier, addressing the therapy needs helps you as the teacher because your child's better able to attend to what you're teaching, and it helps your child because he's better able to attend to what you're teaching. So stopping academics to address therapy needs helps both of you. It actually helps the entire family. And resist the urge to press on to keep your child from falling behind. A lot of people won't deschool if they take their child out of public school because they're already behind. Or a lot of people will continue to homeschool through the summer because their child's in developmentally third grade, but chronologically he should be in fifth grade. Just take that out of your mind. There is no behind in homeschool. So your child is where he's at. Don't continue to press on and press on and press on till you're both at each other's throats trying to get him to catch up, because he will make leaps and sort of catch up as he goes along. But when you first start, you gotta plug those holes before you can build the ship. So forget that your child is behind and just know that your child is exactly where he's supposed to be. Let's look at ways to find their developmental level. It's important when homeschooling autism that you know their developmental level. Most likely your child is not going to be at grade level in many subjects, if any. So you need to know their developmental level and what grade level that pertains to. So it's important to know that because that's the level that they're going to work at. That's where you need to start, and that's where you need to fill in the gaps. So what are the ages of children they naturally gravitate to when playing? When we would go to family, Logan would naturally gravitate to the younger kids, not the older kids or the kids his age, because he felt more comfortable with them. Same thing when we went to the park or any other event. So sort of eyeball what are the ages of the children that they gravitate to. What TV shows do they watch or toys do they play with? Do they like younger toys? Do they still watch Blue's Clues? I'm aging myself there, but Paw Patrol, things like that. You can just get down and play with them. When you play with them, you're going to learn pretty much where they're at pretty quickly based on what they play. Some kids don't like for you to play with them. So if your child is like that, don't do that, because you don't want them to be stressed while you're doing it. You can also get a developmental checklist from cdc.gov. It'll tell you exactly what developmental level your child is with. It's a little harder when they are older to do those developmental checklists because they go up to age like 5 or 6 and then they don't go any further for some reason. You can also ask someone who's familiar with them. Do they have their therapist? Their therapist would know. Do they have a person that they see on a regular basis? I would recommend not asking a family member like grandma what they think, because they're going to sugarcoat it, and you don't want it sugarcoated. You want the God honest truth. You want to know exactly where they are, and you don't want someone to say, well, he'll talk when he's ready, or, well, maybe he just doesn't like doing that, and that's why he doesn't do it. That's not what you need. You need someone who's going to say, yeah, no, he's 5 years old. He should be drinking from a cup without a straw or a lid. Or, yeah, he's 5 years old. He should be at least getting a little bit interested in learning and wanting to read. So you need to hear things like that from someone, not, well, he's just not there yet. He's an early 5. Because you're trying to find their level so that you can plug the holes and you can make those developmental gains. Another way to be successful when homeschooling autism is to incorporate adaptive technology. We have to understand that there are simply some things our kids aren't going to be able to do without support, and that's okay. Take a deep breath and tell yourself, that's okay. If it makes our child successful to have adaptive technology rather than trying to sit there and do it themselves the hard way, then we need to make them successful. If our child needs a wheelchair because they can't walk, we're not going to not give them a wheelchair so that they can move around. They can be mobile. It's the same thing. If your child needs supports in order to be successful, give him those supports. So a couple of supports could be, you could be their scribe. We all know that writing is hard for our children with autism. It's hard to get those thoughts from their head onto the paper. That's a higher level executive functioning skill. So what you can do is let them tell you the answers or tell you the story or tell you whatever, and you write it down for them. You're not making them lazy. You're not letting them take the easy way out. You're simply making them successful. As they get older, you can let them type it out or use speech to text technology. Microsoft Word has Google has it as well, where you can hit the microphone and your child can talk, and it will type it out onto the screen for them. So you could use that. You could use Dragon Speak. You could use anything. If your child has all behavior is communication. So let's clarify that first. But if your child is not verbal, you need to use a communication device or teach sign language. For this particular item, if you have not already incorporated that into your homeschool, you need to stop academics until you have the communication device or sign language down pat, because that's going to be a huge I can't even think of the word. You're not going to be able to get around that. That's going to be a huge hurdle for you to get past in order to teach. So that would be one thing that would make you want to stop academics in order to address. For math, you can use abacus. Of course, math you see is an excellent one with manipulatives and all that. So if you have a highly visual child, use a highly visual math. You can copy the work on different colored paper if you have a dyslexic child, or if your child just has difficulty reading. It's sort of like the Erlen lenses. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but the child wears them and it puts things in different colors for him so that they can pay attention better. And it's just, I don't want to say it tricks the brain, but it helps the brain see what normally the child would not see. That's using the same thing if you put it on different colored paper. You can use large pencils, markers, pens, so those really large kindergarten markers or crayons that you can buy at back to school. If your child is still using them in the 5th grade, it's okay. Just let him use them until his fine motor gets stronger, or until you go over and teach them how to type or use speech to text technology. Lower your expectations. It doesn't have to be perfect every time. Your child doesn't need calligraphy style writing, or he doesn't need to be able to make a perfect 5. As long as you can understand what he's trying to say, just keep teaching. Don't expect perfection. I say this with all kids, even neurotypical kids. Don't expect perfection. That's not your goal here. Your goal is to give them a love of learning and to teach them. So sort of lower your expectations a bit, breathe. As a perfectionist myself, I can tell you this one is really hard. But once you lower those expectations a little bit, you will find your child will thrive. And of course, remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. We're teaching to the long game here. So by putting these into motion, we will help them build those higher level skills that they need, and we will help them be successful, which is what ultimately we want. We talked about this earlier a bit, but just forget about grade levels. My kids never knew what grade they were in, except when we went to church. They would always say, well, I'm in the 3rd grade classroom, or I'm in the 5th grade classroom, or whatever. So they never knew their grade. And we forget about grade levels because every subject has a different level. Even on my neurotypical child, she always worked at different levels. So we tailored her curriculum, just like we did with Logan, our child with autism, to her strengths and weaknesses. So she could be working at 2nd grade math, but be working on 4th grade writing. So it's okay. Just forget about grade levels. Go at your child's pace for every single subject. There will be days your child will not do writing with you. There will be days your child will not do math for you. Just continue to go. You got it. Continue to move along. Remember that relationship trumps academics. So rather than fighting with your child every single day to do every single subject, just realize that he's not into it that day, and that your relationship with him is far more important than him doing math that day. Madison one time sat at the table for 2 hours doing 1 page of math. She's not even my child with autism. I was I was at wit's end, and I posted on Facebook. I can't believe 2 hours later we're still doing math. And one of my dear friends came back with, is it worth your relationship with Madison to get this math paper done? No, it never is. So go at your child's pace for every subject. I'm not saying he can miss math 5 days a week. I'm just saying if he's not into math that day, maybe you could do 2 lessons the next day. You could still go at that pace, or you can just keep going. Maybe he likes to do math on Saturday. So there you go. Teach to mastery. You're going to find it's much easier if you make sure your child masters the concept before you move on. A lot of curriculum can be spiral based, and by spiral based we mean they introduce the concept and they keep building on it throughout all the other lessons. Teaching textbooks is a spiral based curriculum. I teach to mastery. So while we use teaching textbooks as our math curriculum, we will stop like in fractions, and we will make sure he has fractions before we move on. Sometimes our kids aren't able to remember that they learned it a couple of lessons ago and that they need to apply it here. So that's why we teach to mastery for every lesson. So that way, excuse me, that way when they get there, they know how to do it. You'll make much bigger developmental gains if you do that. Focus on your child. Only your child. Your child is not in competition with anyone. He's not in competition with a sibling. He's not in competition with the public school kids. He's your child. So focus on what works, the pace, and what works for your child and your child only. This goes back to there's no behind in homeschool. Because if you're just focusing on the level that your child's at and what he needs to be successful, then you're not behind. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. So sort of put your blinders on and only focus on your child. It can be hard, especially if you have nieces and nephews or siblings that are the same age that you see what they're doing and your child is not. Don't look at that. Only your child. We're only focused on making sure our child is successful. And if other kids are, then we're happy for them. But that does not make our child less successful. That does not define our child because other kids can do it better. Our child is just our child, and what he does is just perfect. You're probably kind of surprised to see this slide in this presentation, but it's really that important. If you're going to be successful homeschooling autism, you have to take care of yourself. If you're going to be successful being a parent with autism, you're going to have to take care of yourself. It's okay to admit your kid's a ton of work. It's okay to admit it's hard. It's okay to admit that you're frustrated and this is not what you expected to be doing with your life. But you have to take care of you. So you help your child the most by taking care of you. And it's not selfish to call it an afternoon because you just can't do it that day. Like sometimes my head hurts. I didn't sleep well the night before, and I'm like, you know what? We did read aloud. We're good. Watch this educational video and go play some games. And it's okay. It really is okay to do that because sometimes mama just doesn't have it. And it's okay to admit that. It is not selfish to take time away from your child or homeschool. Once you adapt there's no behind in homeschool, this will be a little bit easier. It'll be easier to take time off. When we take field trips, we don't do school that day because by the time I get the kids ready for the field trip, we do the field trip, we come home from the field trip, I get Logan to unwind and get something to eat and all that from the field trip. I'm exhausted. So we don't. We just don't. So that way I just say no, mom can't do it. So we schedule a regular break that helps me. One, it helps it not turn into an Autism Rising day, which is it's my code. Autism Rising is my code word for we're struggling today. We're really, autism's kicking our butt today. So we need to, pivot. So scheduling regular breaks will help you stick it out on those tough days when nothing you do is right and your child just can't control himself. So you need to attend to that instead of homeschool. That goes along with it's okay to admit your child is a ton of work. So by taking a regular break, you're able to help your child better and be less frustrated. Always put your oxygen mask on first. This is one of my friends will tell me that when she sees me really frustrated and perturbed and just over it. And she'll just be like, Penny, you need to put your oxygen mask on first. I need to take care of Penny so that I can take care of Logan better. And that's what this whole slide is about. Make sure you have someone in your life that when they see you need to take a break, they'll tell you to take one, and make sure you take them regularly. I feel like we've been talking about this slide for the whole session. Know when to call it a day. Some days are just going to be harder than others. They're just going to be hard. No matter what you do, it's not going to work. Call it a day. You don't have to get through every subject in order to call it a successful homeschool day. Some days are just hard, like there's a full moon, or you didn't sleep well the night before, or you had to have Frosted Flakes for breakfast instead of Captain Crunch. So some days are just hard. We remember that relationship trumps academics every single time. So if it's already a hard day, you're already butting heads with your child, just stop. Just stop homeschooling, go play a game, snuggle up and watch a movie, do something that builds the relationship. Because the more you build that relationship, the more your child will trust you, and he'll push through those hard days sometimes because he knows that you have his best interest at heart. So building your relationship with your child should be your number one objective when you're homeschooling. Relationship will trump everything else in that. Don't be afraid to change something if it's not working. If doing math after breakfast isn't working well for you, then do math after lunch, or do math before bed, or just sort of find your schedule and find your rhythm, and it's not wrong if someone else doesn't do it that way. My husband worked nights for many years, many, many, many years. So he would go to work, he would leave for work at 3 p.m., and he would get home sometime, it was a 12-hour day, so sometime between 3 and 5 a.m. I found that it worked better to not start school until he left for work, because you can't do school in Dad's home. Dad's just awesome. All the kids want to do is hang out with Dad. So we started school when Dad left for work, and then we just homeschooled all the way up to like midnight. And when we finished, we would start getting ready for bed, and I would put the kids to bed pretty close, sometime between midnight and 3 a.m., because sleeping children are easier to keep quiet so Dad can sleep in a bit when he gets home. Just because our homeschool schedule was completely different from everybody else that we hung out with doesn't mean it was wrong. It means it works for us. So don't be afraid to do something totally out of the ordinary if it works for your family. Don't be married to one curriculum. If teaching textbooks isn't working for you for math, switch over to Saxon. If Saxon doesn't work, switch over to Math Mammoth. If that doesn't work, switch over to Math UC. If it's not working for you, I don't care what time of year it is, like you've only done 3 lessons, but you know it's not working, stop and find something else, because you're not going to do anybody you're not going to give an advantage. You're not going to do anybody any good by continuing through that curriculum that doesn't work for you. Remember, even slow progress is still progress. So if it takes you a week to do one math lesson, it's okay. You do one math lesson. Woohoo! You celebrate that on Friday. So slow progress is still progress because it's a marathon, not a sprint. I hope I've given you some stuff to think about. I hope you learned something new. This is where you will find me in other places if you have questions, or if you want to follow me. If you want to see our homeschool day, that would be on Instagram. And then, of course, Facebook and all that we also do as well. So if you have questions, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you. Or if you have a success that you want to share, I would love to hear that as well. So thanks for coming to my session.